This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. I recently watched Cory Barker's Obsession after getting tons of comments about how this scene reminded people of the ghost walk scene from Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Kairo. Indeed, the resemblance is striking, from the framing and lighting all the way to the uncanny walk itself. The inspiration is obvious. But what Barker does with it is far more interesting. First, he subverts the expectation by reversing the walk, resetting the setup and rebuilding the tension. Then there is a subtle change in Nikki's voice pitch, along with beautifully crafted makeup that is just obscured enough by the lighting to signal that something is off about her appearance. Meanwhile, the music drones in the background, its presence only becoming apparent when it disappears into rare moments of complete silence.
Can you come back to bed?
No.
The culmination of all these elements is shown in the form of a jump scare, where Nikki, the victim antagonist, appears before Bear, the villain protagonist, with an unsettling crab walk performed by a professional dancer. And this is where Obsession's true brilliance shines through. Instead of forcing in another jump scare or simply ending the scene on a cliffhanger, it does something far more unexpected. You see, what makes Obsession such an effective horror film isn't the influences or the shocking images. It's the film's refusal to restore any sense of balance.
For Sandy, okay?
When you watch a film filled with generic jump scares, you leave with the impression that the film relied on cheap scares, regardless of how well the rest of the film actually went. Which is why I walked out of the theater thinking Obsession had no jump scares whatsoever. Except it had 10. So why did I think there were none? More often than not, poorly executed jump scares disrupt the narrative because they exist for the scare itself. They rely on an abrupt visual change, reinforced by an equally abrupt non-diegetic audio cue, not because the story demands it, but because without it, the scare would be exposed for what it is.
I said read the
But in Obsession, every jump scare feels earned, because it's directly tied to Nikki's unpredictable nature, reinforcing the film's central conflict while driving the narrative forward. In short, it's a tool that better communicates the story, not a gimmick that replaces it. And because their occurrences are organic, the loud auditory cues will either be only diegetic
a boys' night tonight.
or be non-diegetic cues following diegetic sounds. Whether it be providing a glimpse into the implications of the wish, the length wish Nikki will go to have Bear for herself, or the way wish Nikki generally thinks and functions, the jump scares always make sure to provide meaningful information that will, in turn, increase the overall tension. But again, Obsession's primary weapon is its instability. So where there is a well-crafted that creates a rhythm of tension and release, there is a disruption of that rhythm by withholding the release itself. The Fakeout. Now, a fakeout might seem like a device that relieves tension, but if a good jump scare works through implication, a good fakeout works through anticipation to maintain or even heighten the tension.
Bear?
This is why the bedroom scene is so effective, because it plays with your expectations while also creating a strong narrative implication. Hiding Nikki in the shadows for an effective reveal, accentuating her altered state through an unnatural walk, defying horror conventions by returning her to her original position, rebuilding tension through a tighter medium shot, escalating into an auditory jump scare, delaying the visual reveal for maximum tension, and finally, denying the relief after a long build-up. The ending isn't a letdown, it's confusion, unresolved tension that carries over to the next scene.
Oh my God!
Watch the film with this technique in mind and you'll see just how many scenes actually end in a similar way. And if you need a gentle nudge on how to spot them,
Okay.
pay attention to the music. The very first thing I noticed watching Obsession in theaters was how present the score was. Characterized by a pervasive lo-fi synth sound and constant pitch modulation, the 26 original tracks frequently borrow musical motifs from one another, making them sound like variations of a single leitmotif rather than 26 distinct ideas. They are repetitive, loud, and emotionally honest. Exunlike other films where the bulk of the score is created to work as background ambience, Obsession lets the score take over the scene, openly externalizing Bear's state of mind. Across roughly 35 scenes featuring music, 30 draw from the same unmistakable sources, 20 reinforce the same musical language, while 13 are abruptly cut off by shifts in Bear's mental state, making its absence just as noticeable as its presence.
And then you gave me yours, but like.
There, Lando liked me. You're on thin ice. Okay. Night.
But the lack of subtlety exists for the sake of characterization and foreshadowing, not because the film thinks the audience is stupid. This is precisely why I mentioned the music as a way to identify the fakeouts, because Obsession weaponizes the score's distinctive identity, strategically cutting it in and out to manipulate the audience's expectations. For example, there's one scene near the end of the film that genuinely shook me to my core without showing anything explicitly frightening. It was when Ian wished for $1 billion.
I need you to say, I wish my friend Barry. I wish for $1 billion.
On the surface, this scene is almost comedic in nature. Bear comes to Ian for help, explaining that the One Wish Willow is real and that Ian must help him modify the wish. Of course, Ian laughs it off, breaking the One Wish Willow and asking for $1 billion, at which point, cash rains from above. Now, context matters. From Bear's perspective, he's been through so much hell, and having Ian make a wish for him was basically the last chance he had of salvaging the situation. That final hope was taken away from him, which he 100% deserved, but that's beside the point, by the most generic and ridiculous wish. With that, here's how the climax is constructed. First, the money raining from the ceiling is a jump scare in and of itself. And because the score also kicks in the exact moment money starts pouring down, we get a full audio-visual jump scare. But what really matters is what that music is. The track that plays in the scene is called Billionaire, and it's one of the brightest pieces on the soundtrack. While it shares the same musical DNA as the rest of the score, its distinctly major sound feels almost triumphant, as if something truly beautiful has just happened. That's what makes it so unsettling. It's too ethereal, too powerful. It becomes the audio equivalent of horror in broad daylight. $1 billion sounds like good news, and a hit or two on your head doesn't sound particularly threatening. But the audience isn't startled by danger here, they're startled because reality itself has changed. Throughout the film, wishes have remained a mystery. You may believe, hope, or doubt, but nothing was for certain until now. This scene forces you to instantly rewrite your understanding of how this world works. The realization of the wasted chance for both Bear and Nikki therefore hits harder than a conventional scare. Again, it's a gradual breakdown of order, morality, and expectation, an imbalance in the system. Nikki may be erratic and unpredictable, but she isn't incomprehensible. In fact, her character is quite simple. She loves Bear more than anything else. The real mystery is Bear's intent. Not only is he set up as a likable character, but we are also forced to watch the entire film from his twisted and biased perspective. He constantly plays the victim card, justifying his actions and gaslighting both Nikki and the audience. Yet ultimately, he is a villain protagonist. The real surprise of Obsession wasn't how unpredictable Nikki was, it was how evil Bear was. I shit you not, his actions scared me way more than any of which Nikki's crazy walks or her kills. Nikki versus Bear, or again, the victim antagonist versus the villain protagonist. This ironic clash is what Obsession is essentially built on. Horror that proves straightforward versus comedy that leaves you more uncomfortable than relieved. The unnatural ADR, intentionally noticeable reverse shots, and background compositions all reveal a film that consistently chooses imbalance over resolution. And this contrast can be found even within Nikki herself. Sometimes when the horror of the scene relies on uncertainty, the film obscures Nikki's face through props, lighting, and even depth of field. Other times when the horror comes from understanding her intent, it does the opposite, lingering on her expression for a second too long. Just like the paradoxical dynamic found within the film world, Obsession ultimately churns that idea onto the audience. While it declares certain ideas loud and clear, it also effortlessly convinces you that you've figured out what you're seeing before taking that certainty away. When that happens, you do not know what you're looking at. And not knowing is always scarier. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. There was so much talk about Obsession in the comment section of my videos that I had to run and watch the film, which I'm happy I did because I really enjoyed Obsession. I decided to talk more broadly about what the film is doing, but trust me, you can choose any one thing, be it lighting, score, or the script, and go super in depth with it. And as always, to get myself in the right mood, I rewatched other similar genre films that I love on Mubi, the sponsor for today's video. Mubi is an online curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe, ranging from works of iconic directors to emerging auteurs. It's a great way to watch films you already love, but also the perfect way to discover new films you've never seen before. For instance, a film I watched right before sinking my teeth into Obsession was Revenge, a 2017 horror thriller directed by Caroline Faget, better known now as the director of The Substance. And personally, I like to immerse myself in films with strong identities to prepare myself to approach these kind of works from the right perspective. Of course, I'm currently in Canada, so your movie selections might look different depending on your location, but Mubi always has wonderful selection of films available at all times, and best of all, you can try Mubi free for 30 days right now by using my link at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. That's mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. So go check it out, and I'll see you in the next one.